The house looked almost the same as it always had. The garden out front was a little overgrown, the hedges slightly unruly. But it still carried that familiar weight. The kind of weight that you feel when you've been around something long enough for it to become part of your bones, part of your memory. I hadn't been back in months. Not since she moved in. Since she had taken the place I thought was mine. When my mother died, I thought the house would stay the same. I thought, after everything, the things I had known, the spaces I had lived in, would remain untouched. But I was wrong. As soon as she came into the picture, the house started to change. Slowly at first, subtle rearrangements that I convinced myself were nothing. New furniture here. Fresh curtains there, things my father must have wanted to update. But over time, it became harder to ignore. The house didn't feel like home anymore. It didn't feel like mine. One evening, I decided to go back. To see it again. To face what I had been avoiding. I stood at the front door, my hand hovering over the doorknob. The house was still, the air heavy with a kind of silence that made the place feel more like a tomb than a home. I could see the faint light from inside leaking through the cracks of the blinds. My heart was racing in my chest, not with fear, but with something else, anger, perhaps. But also something deeper, something I hadn't been willing to face until now. The key was still in the door. It was a small thing, something anyone else might have overlooked, but to me, it was everything. The key, the simple, innocent thing that unlocked all the memories. All the years of living here with my father and my mother. The place I had once called home now felt like it was slipping away from me, piece by piece. I hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open. The creak of it echoing louder than I wanted it to. I stepped inside, my eyes scanning the entryway, taking in the changes. The familiar smell of the house, a blend of old wood and dust, still lingered. But it was faint now, drowned out by the scent of new paint, new life. I didn't have to go far to find her. She was in the living room, sitting on the couch, flipping through a magazine. Her presence was so familiar now, so permanent, like she had always belonged here. But in that moment, I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand how easy it all seemed for her. How effortless it was for her to walk into my life, my home, and make it hers. She looked up when she saw me standing in the doorway. The faintest flicker of surprise crossing her face before she masked it with a smile. The kind of smile she always wore, perfectly practiced, perfectly polite. "Well, look who decided to show up," she said, her tone smooth, almost playful. But I could hear the edge beneath it. It was always there. She had always known that I didn't belong here. She had always known that, no matter how hard she tried to make me feel welcome, I would never accept her. I didn't answer her right away. Instead, I took a step further into the house. My eyes locked on the key still sticking out of the door. It was a silent accusation. A reminder of everything I had lost. "You're still here," I said finally, the words cutting through the silence. More of a statement than a question. She smiled again, but there was something sharper in her eyes this time. Something that I hadn't seen before. "Why wouldn't I be? It's my home now, too, you know." The words hit me harder than I expected. Home. She was right. She had made it her home. The house I had once shared with my mother and father. The house that had always felt like it was mine, was no longer that. It belonged to her now. I took another step forward, my heart pounding. "You don't get to take this from me," I said. My voice trembling with a mix of frustration and something else I wasn't ready to confront. "This was never supposed to be yours." She didn't flinch, didn't even seem bothered by the weight of my words. Instead, she simply got up, setting the magazine down on the coffee table with an air of calm. That made my blood boil. "You think you can walk in here and just claim it back?" she asked, her voice icy, as if she were speaking to a child. "This house isn't yours anymore, and neither is he." The mention of my father stung more than I expected. But it wasn't the sting I had been prepared for. It was worse. It was the realization that she was right. My father had chosen her. He had chosen to build a life with her. To turn this place into something else, something that didn't include me. The house couldn't hold two regrets. Not when she was so insistent on erasing everything I had once known. I turned away from her, unable to look at her any longer. "You'll never be her," I said, my voice shaking, not with fear, but with something darker. Something deeper. "No matter how hard you try, you'll never be her." For the first time, she hesitated. The smile faltered, just for a second, before she quickly recovered. "I don't need to be her," she said softly. But the words didn't reach me the way she wanted them to. They didn't have the power she thought they did. I didn't look back at her. I didn't need to. I had said what I needed to say. I stepped out of the living room, my hand brushing the doorframe as I left. The key was still in the door. Still there, like it had always been. But this time, I didn't care. I walked out of the house, leaving it behind, leaving her behind. I didn't need to be there anymore. The key would remain, but the house? The house was no longer mine to claim. It was hers. And I had finally accepted that. But I was free. I didn't know what I was expecting when I left, but it wasn't this sense of hollow finality. I had walked out of that house, out of my past. And yet I couldn't quite shake the feeling that something was missing. Something I had been clinging to for so long. The house wasn't just a building, it was the place where I had learned who I was, or, at least, who I thought I was. Now, as I walked down the street, the evening air was colder than it should have been. But I barely noticed. My steps were heavy, weighed down by the realization that she had won. She had taken everything from me, and yet, I hadn't done anything to stop it. I had let her. I found myself at the park, sitting on one of the benches. The city around me moving in its usual rhythm, oblivious to the storm inside me. I tried to steady my breath, tried to think rationally, but it wasn't working. I couldn't get rid of the image of the key still in the door. That silent reminder of how little control I had. The house had never felt like mine again, but that key, it had always been mine. Or at least, I had always thought it was. My phone buzzed in my pocket, snapping me out of my thoughts. I glanced at the screen, not expecting anything important. But it was a message from my father. Just one line. "Can we talk? I think it's time we did." I stared at the message for longer than I should have, my heart tightening in my chest. He wanted to talk. He wanted to fix things. But what was there to fix? Was he finally seeing what had happened? Or was he just trying to ease his own guilt? Trying to make himself feel like he had done enough? I didn't know what to do with the message. I didn't know if I was ready to face him again. I didn't know if I ever would be. I put the phone back in my pocket, standing up from the bench with a sense of finality. I couldn't go back to that house, not in the way he wanted. Not while she was there, while the house had been turned into something else. I didn't belong there anymore. And even if my father wanted to pretend that things could be normal again, I knew that they could never be. She had erased that possibility. I began walking aimlessly, my thoughts scattered. Until I found myself outside a small cafe a few blocks away from the park. I had been here 100 times before, but today it felt different. It felt like a place where I could sit and breathe, where I didn't have to be anyone else. I stepped inside, ordered a coffee, and found a seat by the window. I watched the world outside as I sipped my drink, my mind wandering back to the conversation with her, to the words she had said that night, to the house that felt like a foreign place now. You think you can just walk in here and claim it back? I laughed bitterly to myself. That's exactly what I had been doing. I had been trying to claim back something that wasn't mine anymore. The house wasn't my home. She had made sure of that. And it wasn't just the house. It was everything. The family I had once known, the place I had thought I would always belong, it was all gone. But as I sat there, drinking my coffee, I realized something. She hadn't just taken things from me. I had let her. I had given her the power. I had spent too much time trying to keep a place at the table when the truth was, I didn't have to. I didn't need to stay in a house that wasn't mine. I didn't need to fight for a family that had already moved on without me. The thought was liberating in a strange, bittersweet way. I didn't have to fight anymore. I didn't have to prove that I belonged. I already did. I just had to stop pretending I didn't know it. I stood up, finishing my coffee, and walked back out into the streets. It was still cold, but now it felt like a kind of freedom. A freedom I hadn't known I was missing until I stepped away from everything that had once held me in place. As I walked, I found myself not thinking about the house, not thinking about her. I thought about what came next, about the life I was beginning to build. The parts of myself I had forgotten. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled, knowing that I was going to be okay. The days after that evening felt almost surreal. Each one passed by in a blur of newness. As if the world had shifted just enough to make everything feel unfamiliar and yet oddly comforting. I had taken my first steps into a life where I wasn't defined by the house, by the lies, or by anyone else's expectations. It was just me now, walking down a path I had never fully seen before, but one that I could finally call my own. I didn't contact my father after the message. Part of me wanted to go back, to try to fix things, to make it all okay again. But the other part of me, the part that had been silenced for so long, knew better. I didn't need to seek his approval. I didn't need to go back to the place that had never truly been home. One afternoon, I found myself at the local park, sitting on a bench near the edge of a small pond. The autumn air was crisp, and the leaves around me had turned vibrant shades of red and orange. The world felt alive, vibrant in a way it hadn't in a long time. The peace of the park, its quiet hum, the occasional chirp of a bird or rustling of leaves, was soothing. I hadn't realized how much I needed something as simple as nature to help quiet my thoughts. My phone buzzed in my pocket, interrupting the stillness. I glanced down and saw it was a text from my father. I hesitated for a moment before unlocking the phone and reading it. I understand if you're not ready to talk, but I hope you know I'm here when you're ready. I read it again, trying to understand the weight of it. There was no anger in his words, no demand for answers. But there was something else there, a sadness, perhaps, or regret. I realized that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't expecting me to fix everything for him. Maybe he was waiting for me to finally fix myself. I put my phone away and leaned back on the bench, staring up at the sky. The truth settled into me with a heavy sigh. I had spent so much time running from the past, from the house, from her. That I hadn't realized I was running from myself too. The house might not have been my home anymore. But that didn't mean I couldn't make a home for myself somewhere else. I wasn't defined by the things I had lost. I wasn't defined by the walls of a house or the people who tried to erase me. I was who I chose to be. Later that evening, I found myself sitting at the same cafe, sipping tea and watching the world go by. I felt lighter than I had in months. But there was still a lingering weight to the memories, something unfinished. She had left a mark on me, not just on the house, but on the way I had lived. The things she had taken, my sense of belonging, my family, my place, had left scars. But those scars didn't define me. They were just a part of my journey, a part of my story. As I sat there, reflecting, I realized that I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of her, not of my father, not even of the life that awaited me. I had spent so long waiting for the world to give me permission to move on. To be who I was meant to be. But now, I saw clearly, I had always had that permission. I had just been waiting for the right moment to take it. I stood up, leaving the cafe behind. The night air felt sharper now, colder, but it didn't bother me. It was as if I could finally breathe without feeling trapped. Without feeling like something was holding me back. I had taken my first step toward freedom. The house would always be there. It would always stand as a monument to what I had lost. But it no longer had control over me. It no longer had the power to define who I was. I didn't need to go back. Not to the house, not to my past. I was finally moving forward. And this time, I was taking everything with me, my pain, my strength, my past. And all the pieces of me that I had left behind. For the first time in my life, I was finally whole. And no one could take that away from me. It had been a few weeks since I had made my decision to leave the house. To step away from the past. I was settling into my new routine. A rhythm that was entirely mine, and slowly, I felt like I was gaining a sense of control I hadn't known I was missing. But as much as I had convinced myself that I was moving forward, I still couldn't escape the memories that haunted me. They weren't the kind of memories that could be banished with time or distance, they were the kind that followed you around like shadows, lingering at the edge of your consciousness. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her, her smile, her presence. The way she had slowly taken everything from me without even having to try. The key still stuck in my mind. I hadn't gone back to the house since that night. But the image of it, the key left in the door, was burned into my thoughts. It was a symbol of everything that had changed. That little metal object had been my link to my family, to my childhood. And now it was a symbol of loss. She had taken it, taken that space in my life. And I was left standing on the outside looking in. I couldn't let it go. Not yet. One night, I found myself standing outside the house again. The street was quiet, and the windows glowed faintly with the warm light of a home that no longer felt like mine. I could feel the weight of it, the pull to go back, but I fought it. I didn't need to go back to the house. I didn't need to face her again. What I needed was to find my peace. I turned to walk away, but before I could take more than a few steps, the front door opened. And there she was, my stepmother. She stood in the doorway, framed by the soft glow of the house behind her, looking out at me. Her expression was unreadable, but there was something there, something that made the air between us crackle. For a moment, neither of us said anything. The silence stretched on longer than I cared for, until she finally spoke. Her voice soft but laced with something sharp. "You really can't let go, can you?" she asked, the words cutting through the cool night air. I felt a surge of anger, of frustration, and for a second, I wanted to lash out. To tell her how much she had taken, how much she had destroyed. But instead, I forced myself to stay calm. To stay steady. I was done being controlled by her, by my memories of what once was. I'm not here to fight with you, I said, my voice steady. I'm just here to be free of what you've taken from me. She stepped out of the doorway, closing the distance between us, her gaze intense. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something that wasn't just coldness. It was something like regret. I didn't want this, she said, her voice almost too quiet. I never wanted you to feel like you didn't belong. But you made it so difficult. My heart twisted at the words, and I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. I didn't make it difficult, I said, my words coming out sharper than I intended. You made it impossible. You pushed me out, you replaced me. And I let it happen because I didn't know any better. I didn't know I had a choice. Her eyes narrowed, as if the words stung more than she was willing to admit. She looked away, her gaze lost for a moment, before she looked back at me. You've always had a choice, she said, her voice softening slightly. You just didn't know how to use it. I was quiet for a long moment, considering her words. I had spent so much time angry, so much time blaming her for everything that had gone wrong. But now, standing here, in front of her, I realized something. She was right. I had always had a choice. I had always had the power to take back what was mine. I've let you take everything from me, I said, almost to myself. But I'm not going to let you take any more. This house, my memories, they belong to me. I'm done pretending they don't. Her expression wavered, just slightly, as if my words had broken through something. But she didn't argue, didn't fight back. She stood there in silence, her eyes locked with mine. For the first time, I saw her for what she was, not the villain I had painted her to be. But a woman who had made her own choices, for better or worse. And maybe, in some way, I had made mine too. I'm done being your shadow, I said, my voice steady, clear. I'm done being anyone's shadow. And with that, I turned and walked away from the house. From her. From everything that had held me back. This time, when I walked down the street, I didn't feel the weight of the house behind me. I didn't feel the pull to turn around and look back. I was free. And for the first time, I felt the strength to build my own future. Without anyone else's shadow hanging over me. The weeks that followed felt like a slow unraveling. A peeling away of everything that had kept me tied to a version of my life I no longer recognized. I had walked away from the house, from her, and from the life I had once known. And with each passing day, the air around me felt lighter. The memories, once sharp and painful, faded into something more manageable. Like old photographs whose edges had started to fray. The freedom was intoxicating, but it wasn't without its challenges. The absence of the house, the absence of everything I had thought was a part of me, left a hollow space that I wasn't sure how to fill. I knew I needed to find something else, something of my own. Something that wasn't tied to that past. I started small. I found a new place to live. A small apartment with just enough room for me to breathe. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And that was all I needed. I kept my days simple, spent time walking the city streets. Taking in the places that had always been there but felt new now. There were coffee shops, parks, bookstores, things I had passed by without ever really seeing. One afternoon, as I sat in a small cafe near my new apartment, sipping a cup of tea, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window. For the first time in a long while, I didn't recognize the person staring back at me. She looked different, not broken, not lost, but whole. The person I saw wasn't the version of me that had been tangled up in the house. In her presence, in my father's absence. The person in the reflection was someone who had finally let go of everything that had been holding her back. I wasn't the same anymore. The phone buzzed in my pocket, breaking my train of thought. I fumbled for it, expecting it to be an unsolicited message or something equally trivial. But when I saw who it was, my breath caught in my throat. It was my father. I stared at the screen for a moment, unsure of what to do. I had spent so much time avoiding this moment, avoiding him. Avoiding the question of what we would become after everything had fallen apart. But now, as the phone sat in my hand, it didn't seem as terrifying as it once had. I answered it, taking a deep breath before speaking. "Dad?" There was a pause on the other end. A soft sigh that seemed to carry the weight of so many unspoken words. "Hazel, I've been thinking about you a lot. I know I've made a mess of things, and I don't expect anything from you. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything." His voice was quiet, thick with emotion, and I realized that this apology wasn't just for me. It was for him, too. He had been carrying this weight for so long. A weight I had only begun to understand after I had let go of everything that had kept me anchored in that house. "I know," I said, my voice steady, though there was a lump in my throat. "I know, Dad. And I'm sorry too, for how things turned out." There was a silence, long and heavy, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a silence that spoke volumes about the distance between us. About the things we had both lost, and about what could never be recovered. But it wasn't a silence of regret. It was a silence of acceptance. "I don't need you to fix it," I continued softly. "I've already started moving on. I'm building my own life now. And I think I'm finally okay." On the other end of the line, I could hear him swallow, and when he spoke again, there was a softness to his voice that I hadn't heard in years. "I'm proud of you, Hazel. I always was, even when I didn't know how to show it." I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of those words sink into me. The words I had been waiting for so long, finally came. Not in the way I had imagined, not as a way to fix everything, but as a quiet acknowledgement of the person I had become. "I'm proud of me too," I said quietly, smiling to myself. More to the version of myself I had found than anything else. I'm proud of who I've become. We didn't need to say anything else. The conversation didn't need to go any deeper. It had already reached a place of understanding. Neither of us could change the past, but in that moment, we were finally ready to move forward. The call ended, and I sat there in the cafe, letting the silence settle over me like a blanket. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't tied to the past, to the house, to her. I had let go of everything that had kept me in limbo for so long. I had made peace with it, and that was enough. As I looked out the window, watching the world pass by, I realized that I had finally found my way forward. It was mine to choose, mine to shape. I didn't need anyone else's approval, and I didn't need to fix anything. I just needed to live. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. I was free to be who I was always meant to be. Free to make a life that was truly mine. And I knew, in that moment, that nothing would ever hold me back again. Top of form. Bottom of form.